In the arena, CNN political national security analyst David Sanger, CNN political analyst, national political reporter for Axios, Alex Thompson, Democratic strategist, former senior advisor to the Biden and Harris presidential campaigns, Adrian Elrod, the former Speaker pro tem of the House, Patrick McHenry. We're also joined by retired U.S. Army officer, the Colonel Peter Mansour. Thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to get to the Colonel in just a moment on the very serious aspects of this. But David Sanger, how many wars have U.S. presidents started on a feeling?
You know, we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know that in international law, as you're trying to justify an act of war, feeling doesn't count for much. Facts count for everything. Right?
And a feeling based on fact is what Caroline
And a feeling based on fact, it reminds me during the war against Saddam Hussein in Iraq, that they came up with the phrase anticipatory self-defense, right, rather than saying it was an offensive operation. And that gets to all of what you've been hearing in the past 3 days with all of these different explanations. The White House needs a way to say that this was a preemptive attack, which is to say they saw Iran preparing to attack the U.S., and so the U.S. attacked them first, or the U.S.'s interests, bases, and so forth. The problem is none of the intelligence seems to point that the Iranians were going to do that, nor should they have, given the weakness of Iran, right? Their economy is in trouble. Their military was degraded by the war with Israel. Politically, they were facing people on the streets. They were in tough shape. They were not about to go pick a fight openly with the U.S. And so that creates a problem. And now we've suddenly heard, well, maybe they could have built a nuclear weapon quickly. Well, we know they couldn't have. The fuel goes buried back in June by the U.S. attacks. They wanted to do a missile that could reach the United States and be able to soon, except the Defense Intelligence Agency concluded that would be basically a decade away. So this is the latest explanation.
Well, in some ways, to David's point, they're trying to find an America First explanation, and they keep going to different ones. You saw J.D. Vance go on Fox News and basically just talk about, well, the nuclear weapons program. Then you also have Rubio talk about, well, there was an imminent threat against Israel, which would have sucked us in. And the White House is on every single potential side of this issue, and the Republican Party does not know how to message this because they're not getting conflicting signs from various parts of the White House. And it is also, I can tell you, like some frustration among Republicans that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, they don't think is the most effective spokesperson for this, given some of his messaging.
Yeah. And Marco Rubio is shown to be the most effective spokesman for this administration on international affairs. That's what we saw in Venezuela, being front and center. And this is a very Trumpian thing, the feel, right? He takes in information, he has a feel, and that's what the whole administration is built on. What Hill Republicans need to know, and the Republican Party needs to know, is the key set of messaging on the justification here. They don't yet have it. That's the reason why we've heard multiple stories. What you've heard from the international community is very interesting, though. Everyone's saying, well, thank you. This is a net positive to the world, right? The neighbors closest are completely relieved that we took this action. And so there are multiple things that are true here, but the domestic politics of war politics have started very fast this time, unlike previous international actions, at a rapid rate. And I think that will define the rest of the political side.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. It's possibly because the president didn't try to sell this ahead of time to the American people. And so we're talking a little bit about the messengers here, and I want to bring the Colonel in here to talk about what this really means. But I want to show you some of the difference, sir, between the various messengers that the president has out there, including a pretty sharp contrast between what the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said right out of the gate, the first thing out of his mouth today talking about this, versus the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane. Let's watch that. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I stand before you today with one unmistakable message about Operation Epic Fury. America is winning, decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy.
I'm here today to provide the American people and those of you in this room an update on Operation Epic Fury. First, it's with profound sadness and gratitude that I share the names of 4 of our 6 fallen heroes, all from the 103rd Sustainment Command.
So, Colonel, we should note Hegseth did go on to mention these fallen soldiers, but you are someone who led troops into battle when we invaded Iraq. You then later basically helped write the book on counterinsurgency, which it ended up, we ended up needing for years longer than we ever imagined that we might. When you listen to those two things, a leader who is saying we're winning decisively and another who is saying we've lost Americans, and behind the scenes, they're telling members of Congress they anticipate more American casualties. How do you take in this claim that the administration keeps making, this is not Iraq, we're going to go in, then we're easily going to get out? Does it work that way?
Well, probably not. But the problem here is that the administration never went to Congress to ask for a resolution funding the war, approving of the war. Congress has Article 1 authority from the Constitution to declare war or to give the administration some sort of go-ahead, and the administration simply didn't do it. Nor did the president even go before the American people and explain what he was doing. So now, in retrospect, you have all sorts of administration figures making all sorts of different claims about why the war is being waged, and they're trying to think of, they're trying to figure out which one is going to stick with the American people, because right now they've got less than 25% approval among the American people for the action that has been taken. As successful as it's been, it could all turn to dust and ashes in the end if the airstrikes don't cause regime change in Iran, because Iran will be at war with the United States in perpetuity after this action.
And one piece of this, of course, sir, is the drones that Iran have seem to be more effective than perhaps was anticipated. What do you read into that?
We should have paid more attention to the war in Ukraine, where Iranian-built drones and designed drones are being used. The Ukrainians have figured out how to shoot them down and shoot them down cheaply. And that sort of capability needs to be sent to the Middle East. And it should have been done before the conflict began, but now we're playing catch up because we're going to run out of the very expensive high-tech air defense interceptors that are in the region pretty quickly.
David,
I'm just going to say one key thing that, just building on what Colonel Mansour said, achieving regime change, which is a political goal, through the military steps of an air campaign, in history, an air campaign alone with no ground troops, I can't find a single example in modern history where that has happened. Because to control regime change, you basically need to be on the ground. And even then, it frequently doesn't work. Think about our recent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So that's part of the issue of going into this on a feeling. Because while you may come in on a feeling, you need to go out on a plan.
Well, they're talking more about leader change than regime change. You're not hearing any of the democracy talk or nation-building talk that you heard in Iraq, but at the same time, they did use the term regime change.
The president said he wanted people to wait in their homes till this was done and then rise up against their government. So we asked him on Sunday, how are they supposed to do this? He said, well, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps should take their arms and basically turn them over to the people. I'm not sure that's likely to happen.
Indeed. All right, David Sanger, Colonel Peter Mansour, thank you both very much. The rest of our panel is going to be with us throughout the hour. Coming up next.